Hi, my name is Dan Kersten, master's student for Dr. Jerry Roberts at SAGU with the Encountering Non-Christian Religions course, Summer 21. And this is my PowerPoint video on the religion of Buddhism. I hope you find this enjoyable and that maybe someday someone will watch this and find it very enlightening and informative. So I'll just dive right into it. Buddhism started about sometime during the 16th century. The Indian prince Siddhartha Gautama is the founder. Later became known as the Buddha. He's the founder of this religion. There is a little bit of disagreement among Eastern and Western scholars as to the time span of his life and the exact dates of his birth, but is generally agreed that the 6th century BC is where Buddhism originated. One day, after a number of years living in the shelter of his father's palace, Siddhartha Gautama convinced his chariot driver to take him on excursions to the neighboring towns, and it's during those excursions he saw four great sights. In no particular order, he saw a corpse, someone who had died. He saw a sick person, someone suffering from a great illness. He observed a mendicant monk, someone who was begging and living off of the charity of others, an ascetic monk. And he also encountered a very old person who was very near to death. And he concluded by these experiences that all life is suffering, and that all the joys that are promised of life are sadly lacking and are rarely fulfilled. And this troubled him so much that he eventually left his family, his wife and his infant child, his father. He left everything he knew, and he began a great journey, what they call the Great Going Forth, where he left all of that life behind and went into the wilderness to sit under the teachings of yogis and ascetics and the wilderness and try to find a meaning of life and a solution to the causes of suffering and a way to escape this cycle of life, death, and rebirth, which is called samsara. During one of his meditative private times under a Bodhi tree, you see an image here of a Bodhi tree, which is found. This one is found in Thailand. They have a very strange root system. Buddhists revere the Bodhi tree. It's a spiritual tree, a sacred thing for them, and a sacred symbol. You'll find these trees in a lot of Buddhist temples and pagodas all throughout Asia. While sitting under one of these trees, Siddhartha Gautama experienced what he called enlightenment. And as he meditated and tried to separate himself from all desire and all craving, he was separated from his body and had this outer body hyper-aware spiritual state kind of experience where he realized that this was the path to just try to extinguish or annihilate the self and then be reunified to Brahman, the all-encompassing, genderless, personality lacking, unknowable entity of the universe. That everything comes from the Brahman, everything is the Brahman. So this life that human beings are living is an illusion. Your name, your personality, who you are is an illusion. And if you can separate from all of that, you can then be reunified with Brahman. And so Siddhartha Gautama had this experience. He called it his enlightenment experience. He called it nirvana, and he achieved it. And so he came back to tell his followers all about it. We'll go on to that, what he said next in a moment. But nirvana is the ultimate goal of all Buddhists. It's the successful detachment from reality, from cravings and desires, and the reunification, or kind of like the spinning out of all detachment from physical existence, and then spinning out into the cosmos and the spiritual side of the cosmos, and being unified with Brahman. When Gautama came back from the wilderness, having had this experience, he told his followers that he was going to develop what was called the middle way. Before, people were looking for answers to life's great questions through the extremes of self-mortification, depriving yourself of like food and clothing and all kinds of things, and then the extreme excess, self-gratification, an overload of possessions and sensory experiences like pleasure and food and all kinds of things. So Gautama said the right way is the middle way. And somewhere in between all of that extreme is the right way. And to begin on that right path, you have to understand what he called are the Four Noble Truths. The first one, in the ancient Pali language, we use the terms here, is dukkha, the fact that suffering exists. So, since suffering exists, you have to acknowledge it. Life is suffering. Everything that we see in this human life is some kind of suffering. You have a baby, and you love that baby, but one day that child might die. You will grieve and mourn from that child's loss. You will suffer, or you will die one day, and that child will mourn your loss and will suffer for it. You will fall down. You'll hurt yourself. You'll get a job and lose a job. You will one day you will have food, and the next day you'll have no food. The one day you're healthy, the next day you're not healthy. All life is impermanent, and there's suffering, and so this principle of dukkha is what the first noble truth is. The second is samudaya. Suffering exists because of desire and because of wanting. When you want food, when you want clothing, when you want money or power or influence or relationship, you are identifying more closely with yourself, capital S, with the self, than you are Brahman, where you really come from, and you're trying to get back to the Brahman, trying to detach from all of this illusion of what we call existence, this present world, the human life, the human body, the wheel of existence, samsara, life, death, and rebirth, all this stuff with the reincarnation, everything. You're trying to separate and get out of that. So the thing that holds a Buddhist into that endless, hopeless wheel is desire, wanting things, wanting to be or be attached to things other than Brahman. So the third noble truth is good news for a Buddhist. They call it Nirodha, and that there is a way to escape samsara. There is a way to get out of it, to cease all suffering, to cease all existence, and that way leads to noble truth number 4, Magga, the eightfold path to enlightenment, or the correct way to achieve enlightenment. And the eightfold path can be understood this way: right views, intentions, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. Engaging in all of these things equals good karma. Engaging in these things and living these things is the right way achieves good karma. Karma is very important in Hinduism and Buddhism. It's probably misunderstood in Western cultures, the way that Buddhists would understand it. But imagine you are a Buddhist man, you have a wife and you have 2 children. You love your wife, you love your child. Every day you realize because you love your wife, you love your child, and you go out to work and you have because you have these relationships, you love your wife and your child. That is desire. That is working against your ability to detach. You go to the job, you try to earn money so you can pay for food and gas in your car and clothes and a home. You are endeavoring to do things that keep you anchored in samsara, this cycle that you're trying to get out of. So every day you're doing all these things you can see, taste, touch, and smell. And you're being told that this is all illusion, it's not real, and it's keeping you from where you need to ultimately be. And so if your life is a good life or a rotten, miserable life, you're stuck in this cycle. You can't break it. The average Buddhist knows they're never going to reach enlightenment. They're never going to achieve nirvana in this life, and that's incredibly frustrating and depressing for them. So what they can do in this life, though, is try to get good karma. Doing things the right way can cancel out bad karma, your sin, your evil things that you think or say or do. All of us have sin nature. The Buddhists don't understand sin nature. It's not the way Christians understand it. You say or you do or you think something wrong or not right or evil or just a little impure or inappropriate, that's bad karma. And Buddhists are always trying to override the bad karma with the good. So we'll talk a little bit, there will be more examples throughout this presentation about how Buddhists try to achieve good karma and cancel out the bad karma. But first I want to get into an illustration that the Buddha himself used to describe the ultimate goal of the Buddhist to achieve nirvana. And you can understand it by looking at this candle flame burning brightly in the darkness. That is you. That is the person. And when you are attached to desire, your flame burns. But you don't want that. You don't want to be attached to desire or to anything physical in this world because it's illusion, a distraction. You want to meditate. You want to separate from it. And the Buddha said that if you can achieve this level of detachment from all desires, wanting food, wanting relationship, wanting anything, the candle can be extinguished. You can be blown out. It's annihilation. And you no longer exist as you understand it. And you are then free to be unified back with the Brahman. There's no self, there's no consciousness, there's no nothing. And that is the goal of the Buddhists. To be a candle who is just blown out and extinguished. Other notable Buddhist figures, I'll do three of my favorites here, is the man who needs no introduction, the Dalai Lama. He's the 14th Dalai Lama of Tibetan Buddhism, born in the 30s, I believe, or late 20s, early 30s. And he's very elderly now. As you can imagine, he will die soon, and a 15th Dalai Lama will be selected. At the moment he dies, they will begin looking for a little baby who would have been born about the same time he died. The belief would be that his consciousness and his wisdom and everything would be transferred into that baby. And so they will raise that baby to be the 15th Dalai Lama. This guy, Thich Nhat Hanh, is a famous activist author. He was in exile for decades in France. It was a teacher. Some of his books, like Living Buddha and Living Christ, are I would recommend as reads if you want to understand Buddhism at a deeper level, a philosophical level, and some of the challenges that Buddhists have in accepting Christ as Lord and Savior are addressed in Living Buddha, Living Christ. This man wrote that book. He is from Vietnam. He was exiled by the Vietnamese government because he opposed the violent opposition to the communist rebels, who then were starting to kick the French out. Buddhists are anti-war all the way, usually, and this guy was a big activist, and the government didn't like it, so he was exiled. Another notable figure, this was immortalized in this picture. This is Thich Quang Duc. The photo was taken in June of 1966 in Saigon, Vietnam. Time magazine reporter Malcolm Brown happened to be in the right place, the right time. This monk had his disciples douse him in gasoline. He then sat down in the lotus position, began to meditate, and they set him on fire, and he was then burnt up and died as people knelt all around him and fell down and worshipped. And his whole goal here was to protest the brutal treatment of the ruling regime of monks who were standing up against war and violence. And this is an illustration of the kind of fanaticism you will find, a stoic, quiet fanaticism in a lot of Buddhist peoples all over the world. They are very, very anchored in their convictions. And this is also an illustration of the deep, deep demonic oppression that is abundant in Buddhist cultures. This man did not cry out. He did not give any indication that he experienced pain as he was burning alive in front of all these people. And this photograph won a Pulitzer Prize in 1966. The different types of Buddhism in the world, there are many. Vajrayana or Tibetan Buddhism, we've already talked about a little bit. That's where you get the Dalai Lama. Mahayana and Theravada Buddhism are the two largest, probably population-wise, following in that you will find in Asia. Mahayana is called the greater vehicle because, well, it's a wider door. More people can get into it. More people, according to its teachings, more people can achieve enlightenment and nirvana under the Mahayana teachings. But under the Theravadan teachings, it's more conservative. They call it the lesser vehicle. Fewer people are able to conceivably attain nirvana and achieve this ultimate experience of nirvana under Theravadan Buddhism. The other kinds of Buddhism I would recommend some brief study on, at least, is Zen Buddhism, which you'll find prolifically in Japan. You will also find Amida Buddhism in other parts of Asia, and then the Pure Land Buddhism, which is a very interesting form of Buddhism. A lot of interesting teachings and very different from some of the others. Very different from the others, in fact, is Pure Land Buddhism. Buddhist world population trends are not looking very good for Buddhism as a religion that might want to grow. There is not a noticeable there's just not a noticeable conversion rate taking for Buddhists. In fact, on the other hand, there is a noticeable conversion rate of Buddhists converting to Christianity or Islam in the world. Buddhists, in most Buddhist cultures, it seems strange, but there is a low birth rate. If you take China out, there is really a very, very low birth rate in Buddhist cultures. The high poverty and living space that's available being very limited contributes to this. Also, experts believe that if you have millions of babies and little boys and girls that are being given to the monkhood at young ages and would then live a celibate life and not produce a next generation, that's also going to affect the birth rate of your religion. And the top three Buddhist populations there would be China, number one at 244 million, Thailand, and then Japan. And number four would probably be Myanmar in the high 30s, 30 millions, 38, 39 million. Another important aspect that people enjoy reading about, experiencing, etc., is in Buddhism is the monkhood. And there's just as much variety in the teachings and trainings and the look and feel of the monkhood in all the different forms of Buddhism as you would want. I'll go over just a few things that are pretty common for all of them. Both men and women can be monks, or for women, nuns in Theravadan Buddhism. In Mahayana Buddhism, only males can be monks. Typically, people will enter the monkhood at all ages, whether they're given as a baby or a young person, a child, to the monkhood as a way for a poor family to, one, be one less mouth to feed, and two, to attain some good karma. Or if you are an older individual towards the end of your life, you're reaching the sage moment of your life, stage of your life, and you want to try and get it right. You want to try and make an attempt in this life to try and reach enlightenment and attain nirvana. And a lot of monks will enter. A lot of monks and nuns will enter this monkhood at a later age in their life. I've met a number of monks who became monks in their 50s, 60s, and 70s after living what they described as an unwholesome life. And it's very sad that no one had reached them for Christ before they made that decision to enter the monkhood. When you do enter the monkhood, there are three jewels. This goes all the way back to the early followers of the Buddha. They call it the three jewels, or the three refuges. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma, or the teachings. I take refuge in the Sangha, or the order of monks. And this is a three-part mantra that anchors the monk into his or her monkhood. kind of an initiation almost, but something that is important to the heart and mind and spirit of that monk. The other behavioral and social norms, Buddhism has got some very strange ones. From country to country, sect to sect, there is a wide variety of things that would be normal, but we'll just go over a few things that are kind of normal across numerous Buddhist cultures, particularly in Peninsular Asia, where Buddhism is extremely strong. Prayer and meditation, many hours a week of prayer and meditation is very important to the life of the Buddhist. Here you'll see a picture of a couple dozen people packed into a pagoda in Shwedagon, Yangon, in Myanmar, and I knelt down in front of these people while they were praying and reciting passages from the Vinaya or the Dharma, the sacred texts, and praying for their loved ones who had died, praying for various things that anyone would pray for, children, praying for health, and praying for all kinds of things. The idea is that they are speaking to spirits or bodhisattvas, enlightened spiritual beings who might be listening to them. Maybe the Buddha is listening to them, and they are making all kinds of requests. Also, the people who are there just to meditate, they are, again, trying to separate from something, separate from desire, they're trying to also achieve good karma. And so meditation and prayer, mindfulness, and thinking and pondering things is very important to a Buddhist life. Also, there are rituals. Lighting candles, there's rituals all day long that involve lighting candles of some kind. Some of them are quite inane, some of them are very demonic. This little boy here is being taught to light his candle and say his prayers that he would do on a daily basis. To whom he is praying, I do not know. What he's praying about, I do not know. But this ritual is very important to the family structure, especially when they go to the temple. There's also a lot of superstition. In some Buddhist cultures, there's an entire pantheon of gods and spirits that are not understood as gods as an animist would understand them, or that Muslims or Christians would understand their God. But they are rather enlightened beings, enlightened spiritual beings that can serve as adversaries or helpers. And so in Shwedagon Pagoda in Myanmar, I encountered this Bodhi tree and this man lighting a candle and then praying under the Bodhi tree. And he explained to me the reason for the prayers under this sacred tree. The idea is that there are enlightened beings blowing on the wind, blowing through the tree. They will come to the tree to rest and take refuge and to find rest. And as he prays under that tree, perhaps his prayers will be spun up into that tree, and some enlightened being or a spirit, you and I would call them a demon or an unclean spirit, will hear that prayer and somehow answer the prayer or somehow help him or give him an insight of wisdom. And so that is an example of some of the superstitions. If you go to Tibet, you will see the superstition and the demonic manifestation in the rituals accentuated greatly in the Tibetan monasteries, especially if you visit shrines or temples to the god of hell. The demonic atmosphere is palpable, but it is a very different form of Buddhism than what you would encounter here in Myanmar or Thailand. Other beliefs and practices of Buddhism, we'll just go through a couple. Universally, pretty much, Buddhists respect and want the preservation of all life. They are historically and notoriously nonviolent. There are exceptions. There is a group in northern Myanmar that wants to resist any other religion from coming in, and they will be passive aggressive one moment, and then they'll be physical aggressive the next. But those are exceptions. Buddhists want to advocate tolerance. They will listen to the teachings of other holy men like Jesus Christ or maybe the Prophet Muhammad, and they will consider and weigh those teachings and those words against what the what the Buddha taught and what their sacred texts, the Dhamma and the Vinayas, taught them. So there's a wide practice of tolerance of other religions in Buddhism. They don't really believe in any gods. I've said this before. They don't believe in gods or that a human being would have a spirit or a soul, except the only kind of gods they would find in most Buddhist cultures are those beings that are enlightened. In some other way, in some other life, they were enlightened, and now they exist here as what we would call gods or spirits, and they can be helpers or adversaries. In Thailand, it is believed that every property, every little piece of land has a spirit or a little god who lives on that property, someone who was enlightened or just some kind of being that thousands of years ago, whatever, became enlightened and became this spiritual being that now inhabits this property. And a lot of venerations and ceremonies are done to appease and to welcome and to satisfy that spirit. Especially if your house is on the site of where that spirit is believed to live, a lot of your daily life is about appeasing that spirit. So they have pantheons, but not really like the Hindu or animist pantheons or the Greek or Persian pantheons as we understand them. So Buddha versus Christ, perhaps this is not the right wording for a header, but there are many very distinct differences between Buddhism and Christianity. Buddhism really has no solution to sin. There is a hyper overemphasis on works. The Dhammapada, a very sacred text of Buddhism, in verse 165 states that only that oneself is defiled by oneself, and the only way oneself can get rid of that defilement is through oneself. So everything is about the self. Again, the goal is to not be, not exist, for the self to be extinguished, to be annihilated. But yet the self is also needed to get out of the cycle of samsara. And they do not. There's no room in Buddhist thought for someone else to come in and atone for the sin of another. And so the substitutionary work of Christ on the cross is a very difficult concept for them to accept, let alone understand. But it is still an open door type conversation piece to have with a Buddhist. Their objective is to no longer exist. When talking to a Buddhist, it's important to point them to things that they know are real, to ask them, do you really think that all of this that you see and experience really is illusion? How do you know it's illusion? Because it seems very real, and you can then point to the very real love of God and the very real life-changing work of the Holy Spirit. Again, almost every point of Buddhist difference with Christianity is an open door to talk about Christ. And Buddhists generally are very open to have conversations about Christianity. It just must be done in a non-confrontational, non-accusatory, calm and peaceful way. You have to understand that people deal every day with fear, despair, and with this futility of life. Most Buddhists understand they will never attain enlightenment. They'll never achieve nirvana in this life. All they can hope for is to get enough good karma to be reincarnated into something better and maybe get it right in the next life. And that is a very despairing, hopeless way to live. And that makes them, it should make us to feel very compassionate for their spiritual condition, but the way they have been lied to by this false teaching. Buddhists are afflicted in many ways by the demonic. There's also little or no concept of a human soul. And again, that touches again with the fact that they believe there's no self. Buddhists desperately need friendship and relationship that points them to Christ. And the good news is that Buddhists are coming to Christ, pointing to the grace of God and the free offer of salvation through Christ. Is something that they have to be helped to understand. But when they understand the gospel message, it is a beautiful message. This picture is the General Council of the Myanmar Assemblies of God. meeting about 10 years ago. Each of these men are pastors, and each of these men come from minority groups like the Tidimchin, the Kachin, the Koran, the Lisu, and also some from the ethnic majority, the Burmese. And they were born and raised Buddhists, but they came to faith in Christ, and now they are proclaiming that gospel message to their tribes. And every one of them has a story and is an example of how we can actually communicate and effectively communicate the gospel to Buddhists. Friendship evangelism is something that all the missionaries learn, as something that we should all practice every day, not just with Buddhists, but friendship evangelism is a significant strategy for winning Buddhists to Christ. Discipleship as evangelism is an interesting concept to a lot of people. Normally we think of flying in someplace, preaching, taking an altar call, 10 or 20 people are saved, and then you start discipling them, and that's how you become a Christian. Not so in a lot of these cultures. Discipleship as evangelism, teaching the Buddhists how to live like Christ. The discipleship process before the salvation experience is very, very effective in easing them into an understanding of what the gospel message really is. And it opens them up to what we call power encounter. This is very common in the Buddhist, especially the Asian cultures. Radical, powerful encounters, dreams, visions, manifestations of spiritual power, signs and wonders, healings, all kinds of things in their culture. Power encounter happens on a regular basis in the churches, and is a reality in ministry in the Buddhist context. Just a little bit about the Assemblies of God ministries among the Buddhists. The national churches in Peninsular Asia, which would be Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Myanmar, and Thailand, they are seeing steady growth in the church numbers and conversions. This information comes from the Asia Pacific Regional Office, headed up by Dr. Jeff Hartensfeld and the area director Mark Doreen. I myself have traveled to a number of these countries and witnessed some of these things. Some of the growth trends of the church are incredible. Buddhists are coming to Christ, and should be a very encouraging thing for us to hear. Final slide. This is something that I just thought would be really cool to share. Another illustration of this. I would encourage you to follow this link up here on this video, on this slide, to find this video. This picture shows 3,000 Tidimchin, a very small ethnic minority in northern Myanmar that also spans into China and even parts of Laos and Cambodia. It's a very oppressed and disliked, marginalized people group, the Tidimchin. When we got back into Myanmar about 15 to 17 years ago, we expected to find a national church. After 60 years of silence and being cut off from us, we expected to find a national church that was fractious, separated from leadership, unorganized, cowering in the corner, very small, but that is not what we found. We found just among the Tidimchin enough believers here, 3,000 plus, to fill a public hillside where they sang for us the Hallelujah chorus from Handel's Messiah in English, a language they do not understand. And I'm going to tease it right there, and I'm going to leave the discussion right there. I hope you'll find that video. You will not forget seeing that video. 3,000 Tidimchin, former Buddhist believers, singing the Hallelujah chorus. It's really cool. And I hope this presentation on the Buddhist religion has been enlightening and informative. Thank you very much.